Hello, everyone. It's Lisa Alexander, founder and executive director of Stand Up Survivor. I have Vanessa Pazzo. Hey, Vanessa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for joining me. So we're going to give everybody just a few minutes to pop on real quick, and then we are going to get started. I'm super excited. So we'll give it like 30 seconds before I introduce my beautiful guest to do a little housekeeping, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
So you guys let me know when you pop on where you're tuning in from, but also tell me if you hear an echo, because I just hope that you don't. But if you do, please just let me know if you hear this echo. All right. All right, so let us know where you're popping in from and let me know if you hear an echo. Hey, Tammy. Hey, Ambassador. Okay, so Vanessa is a licensed clinical social worker and she is joining us tonight. So hey, Vanessa.
Hello.
Hi, Penny. So she is amazing, you guys. And of course, you guys know I stalk my guests first. And so of course I stalked her and I'm super excited that she said yes to join us. She's with Long Beach Trauma Therapy. And I'm going to just go ahead real quickly and put her information down here at the bottom. Trust me, you're going to want to connect with her, especially if you're in California, because that is where she is licensed to practice. So, okay, awesome. Hey, from Texas and Kentucky. Hey, you guys. Glad you guys are tuning in. Vanessa is amazing. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hey, from the UK. Okay, where am I? I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. Okay, we're ready. So today we are talking about the window of tolerance. And you guys, I'm not even going to lie. I am so not an expert on this. And that's why I brought Vanessa. So Vanessa, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started on the window of tolerance.
All right. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker based in Long Beach, California, and I have a virtual practice where I see survivors of trauma. My practice is majority women of color who have experienced like complex trauma, so a lot of childhood abuse, a lot of relational trauma, and I use a lot of what's called like polyvagal theory, which comes in with the window of tolerance stuff, EMDR, narrative exposure therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. And I love working with survivors of trauma. It's just one of the biggest passions of my life, and I'm happy every day to do it.
Yay, I love that. I love it. I'm so excited to have you, because I think that as a survivor of trauma myself, understanding the window of tolerance is very, very important. And I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started, but as survivors, and I mean, if you guys experience this and you're comfortable, feel free to comment. But a slamming of a door or seeing someone argue or someone, something happening that doesn't have anything to do with us, but our reaction is so significant that sometimes it can paralyze us. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So what is the window of tolerance?
So the window of tolerance is a model for understanding how our nervous system responds to our environment. So our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment. And this is something that's happening subconsciously. Like we don't have to think about it. I don't have to turn it on. It's just always doing it. So that term is called neuroception. So I always tell folks, it's almost like if you think of like a lighthouse, like at the top of the hill and you see the light just kind of going back and forth, it's kind of like what your nervous system is doing. So depending on if it perceives safety or danger, it's going to respond with one of three routes. So those routes are staying within your window of tolerance, or it may take you into what's called hyper-arousal or hypo-arousal. So it's really a model for understanding how you're responding to your environment.
Okay, and I posted something, and she said it was a great symbol of the window of tolerance, and above that was the hyper-arousal and the hypo-arousal, right? And so what is the healthy state to really be in? Is there a healthy?
So what's really healthy is that your nervous system is responding appropriately to your environment. So when people talk about being in your window of tolerance, that does not mean that like life is perfect and everything is sunshine and roses and there's no problems, because that's not reality. When you're in your window of tolerance, it means that you feel like you can tolerate whatever is happening around you. So maybe a challenge comes up and it's like, boom, I can take care of it. I go out and the tires flat on my car and I just think, okay, I have AAA, let me call, someone will come, they can help me and I can go on with my day. That's me within my window of tolerance. I can handle what life throws at me. However, when there is a lot of stress, it can bump you out of your window. So stress can take you up out of your window And that's called hyper-arousal. And that's where your fight or flight stress response lives. A lot of stress can also push you down out of your window. And that's where the hypo response is. So hypo means low. So that's where more of like the depression, sadness, shut down, disconnect, dissociate lives. So that's what's going on when you are responding. The added thing is with trauma survivors, a trigger is when something reminds you of a trauma. And so it'll either put you into hyper, fight or flight, or hypo, shut down, the same as what happened during the actual trauma. So it doesn't necessarily need to be something real in the environment, just the perception that there's danger.
So when you're talking about someone who's experienced trauma in the past, but they currently are safe, like in this moment, we're safe, there's no danger, but something may remind us, something may trigger us. It could be a smell, it could be a song, it could be a sound, it can be the name or something. And we find ourselves going into hyper or hypo. What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So if you're going into hyper arousal, that means you're going into that fight or flight stress response. So even within that, you can think about it almost as happening on like a continuum. So my fight or flight response could be I'm kind of irritated, I'm kind of tense, I'm kind of stressed, I'm kind of outside of the top of my window. But the full expression of that is like full fight, right? I'm going to fight off this attacker because I really think I'm in danger. I perceive something's dangerous. I'm going to fight this person off, or I'm going to literally flee. Like I'm going to book it. I'm going to get out of there. If it's that hypo response, then you may like shut down, dissociate, disconnect, feel sad, low energy, can't think. And so it's really like two opposite extremes that are possible.
But what if you're like not really in danger? You're literally safe, but you feel as though you're not.
Yeah, well, that is very much life as like a trauma survivor, right? You may often feel like you're afraid or like something's going to happen. And if you really were to look around and evaluate the fact that you are safe, it feels like there's like this disconnect, right? Like I know I'm safe, but I still feel afraid. And that's because those traumatic memories are stored differently in your brain. So when it's like stored away in your brain, your nervous system says, okay, anything related to that experience is a sign of danger, and I'm going to protect myself the next time. I'm not going to let that thing happen to me again. So any little thing that reminds your nervous system of that event, it's going to go into that fight or flight stress response or that hypo-arousal response because it wants to keep you safe. So in a way, it's like, thank you, nervous system, for trying to keep me safe, but it's overactive. It's over-responsive. And so with trauma survivors, often it's how to have your nervous system become more like appropriately responsive.
Wow, I really like that you talk about that. I have my pastor to join. Hey, Pastor Tiffany. Hey, I have to say hi to her. Okay, so let me just go back. So I mean, honestly, thinking about it, we have to be really gracious with ourselves.
Oh, yes.
It's our body, it's our nervous system saying, hey, this trauma did happen to you. And while the nervous system is trying to protect us, we're safe now.
Yes.
Happening in our nervous system, like the body keeps score. I know that's probably one of your favorite books.
Yep, I can see it on my shelf from here.
The Trauma Keeps Score. If you guys don't have that book, it is a very, very good book that tells you that even though you are physically safe, your body is going to respond the way that the body was created to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. So remembering that a lot of these things are happening subconscious because our nervous system has been shaped by our experiences. So when you start to be more aware about like being in your window of tolerance or being out of it, sometimes folks might start to beat themselves up of like, oh, I'm always in fight or flight, and that's why I feel so angry all the time. Or I'm stuck in hypo-arousal and I'm depressed, and now I'm going to get mad at myself almost for not being in my window. And, that's almost just kind of adding stress on top of it because now we're also criticizing ourselves. Yeah. And so for me, I always talk to folks about like one of the first things we really have to build is like our own self-compassion, being compassionate for ourselves and our experiences and giving ourselves a little bit of grace, especially if we live in a really stressful or traumatic experience or environment for a lot of years. It's a lot of times that your nervous system had to keep you safe and had to help you survive. And we don't just turn it off like that. It takes time and compassion and not only learning to be safe in our own body, but learning how to be safe around other people too. It's a lot of work.
I just love that. I just want to pull that apart a little bit that you talked about, having grace with ourselves and compassion with ourselves, because our body is just doing its job. And I love how you say, on top of what we're already experiencing, we really kind of have to have grace with ourselves and realize it's part of the process. Because you make a really good point. Oftentimes as trauma survivors, we have lived for so long through different types of trauma, and our body was just doing its job, you know, and you survived it. So that's enough grace. That's enough to celebrate. That's enough to wrap your arms around. But now that you're understanding that some of those triggers, okay, someone said banging, yelling, shouting, hitting, it can be a trigger for them.
Yes.
And so can we talk about that for a little bit? Because oftentimes people talk about triggers. This triggered me, this triggered me, this triggered me. Can you delve into that just a little bit?
Yeah, so trigger is a word that we hear all the time, and people like to use it for a lot of different things. And so when you're talking about trauma, when you're talking about a trauma trigger, what it means is that something in the present moment reminds you, maybe consciously or maybe subconsciously, more on the nervous system level, of something associated with your trauma. So it could be that banging door. It could be like the sound of the deadbolt on the door opening. It could be certain times of day, certain seasons. And so your nervous system associates that with that response. Your nervous system will feel as if that's happening again. So your body is going to respond in the way that it did during the trauma. So I may know I'm safe, but when I hear that person yelling or when I hear that door slam, I may feel that same surge of adrenaline and fear that I felt when I lived in that environment, where that was a sign of someone coming home that was going to hurt me. So that's that kind of differentiation. It's actually, in a way, making you relive an aspect of that experience. And that's why it can be so difficult, because it's not just a memory of your trauma coming forward. It's physical sensation. It could be, certain thoughts that you start to have. It could be the way your breathing changes, the way your palms get sweaty. It's a very full body experience, more of a reliving than a remembering.
I love that. It's more of a reliving than a remembering. And so, people say, oh, why is that such a trigger for you? Why does that smell bother you so much? Why does this happen? Someone just said dates and times are a trigger for them too. A memory or an anniversary of some sort. And it's literally, you are reliving it. It's not just a remembrance of it. And so I'm going to repeat that again for those of you that need to offer yourself a little bit more grace. It's as though your body is reliving it, not simply just remembering it.
Yeah. And sometimes those connections are obvious. Like, I might be able to say like, oh, yelling is a trigger for me because I grew up in a house with a lot of yelling. That may be more obvious, but some of them are harder to connect. Like the person who's recognizing certain times of day or seasons, that's often one that can be kind of lost on folks, because they wouldn't think that like summertime is a trigger, but maybe for a kid who summer was when they were home all the time and they were in danger more, that time of year is going to continue to be really scary. Even though the danger is over, your body doesn't quite know that yet.
Yeah, that is so good. I think that the summer one is a really good one too, to remember. At nighttime, your abuser came home at nighttime and you knew that hell was going to break loose. I shared something the other day about how the evening times, oftentimes abusers would rage at night or keep them awake at different times. And so now some of the survivors were sharing how it's so hard for them to sleep at night, because that is when, the abuser would rage and go on. And so it's really important to recognize these things, right? We recognize them, but also and we're going to talk more toward the end about things that you can do that can kind of to help you process some of those things. I just want to acknowledge we have some students from Jamaica who are tuning in, who are watching us so that they can get in their master's program as well. So, hey, all of you guys that are tuning in from Jamaica. So we want to make sure that you guys get your hours in here. So someone said this is very validating to hear. And that's really, really important, because that's what I really wanted them to know, is that it's normal. You understand what I'm saying? Those feelings that you're feeling, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're going to say something, Vanessa. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It just reminds me, so many folks that I work with, one of the things that they'll say in like one of our first calls or meetings is they'll tell me about how they've been feeling, and they'll say, am I crazy? Because if you don't quite know where these responses are coming from, I can absolutely see why it would feel that way. They feel very much out of your control. And in a way, they kind of are, until you start to develop that awareness. And so you feel like you're losing control of your own physical responses and reactions. And that's why I really love talking about these things and teaching, is because I think knowledge is power. And once I can name it, right, like, oh, I was just triggered, and that's why I felt that surge of fear. Now I know how to nurture myself through that. And I can comfort myself, or I can decide how I want to, move forward. But it's not just coming out of nowhere anymore.
I love that. Okay, so let's name it. You know, things can't be acknowledged, things can't be healed, things can't be changed, Vanessa, until we call it what it is. Let's name it. This is, I was triggered when this happened, and it's difficult, because after leaving, it's like I don't want to think that they still control anything about me. Yeah, but it's not them. This is your body, and that's okay. Your body fought for so long to keep you safe, right? And it's still trying to do that, even though you may not continuously be in the relationship. Hey, Mr. Jackson, someone asked a question I kind of want to go back up to. Okay, here it is. What could our spouses do if we are in a hypo-arousal state? I tend to shut down completely, and sometimes it feels like I can't get out of it. Or I remember, that's kind of a three-part question. I don't want to throw them all at you at the same time. But if they're maybe in a new relationship and they're constantly going between the two, is there something that a partner can do to help them?
Yeah. So one of the great things about being a human being is that we're social creatures. And so before we can ever learn to regulate our own bodies, we actually have to learn that first through co-regulation, which is usually through our primary caregiver, maybe it was your mom or whoever took care of you as a baby. And they teach us how to how to soothe ourselves. When you're a baby, you don't just know how to fall asleep. Someone has to kind of teach you, okay, we wind down and we relax. So if you have a safe and supportive partner, they can be a great tool for helping you to come back into your window of tolerance if they are someone who can maybe help you to recognize, I noticed you've been kind of shut down lately. Are you okay? They can kind of check in with you. So I would definitely, maybe read The Body Keeps the Score together, or even share some of this information with your partner, because they may actually see some of the signs of you coming out of your window before you do, because we're living life. We're usually kind of powering through. We don't pay attention to those early warning signs that we're carrying too much stress or we're kind of shutting down. So if they can, in a gentle way, maybe let you know, hey, you seem like you've been kind of stressed. Maybe there's something that you all can do together. You can go on a walk, or you can just kind of talk, and you can actually feed off of their more settled nervous system or more regulated state and actually help yourself become more regulated. So it's this very symbiotic thing that can happen, which is really beautiful when you have someone that, you can do that with. And it doesn't even have to be a person. If you have an awesome pet, if you ever need to kind of settle or regulate, pet your cat, cuddle your dog, things like that can also help your nervous system, because they have your nervous system too.
I love that. That was just so warm and fuzzy. I mean, realizing, whether it's an animal or a partner, realizing that connection with someone whose nervous system may be more regulated than yours. We're talking about all types of trauma here too. It doesn't necessarily specifically relate to domestic violence. It's trauma overall. And so I love how you're talking about they can recognize when you're coming out of your window of tolerance. And so in order to serve someone, a friend, a partner, you have to talk to them about what that looks like for you. And that's being honest with them. I remember when I first was with my husband, I was like, don't curse at me, don't slam doors, I don't want to hear yelling. It didn't work for me, because what it did to me with someone in that space is told me that abuse was going to happen next. I was going to get hit next, or something was going to happen. So, that's my window of tolerance. I like to stay there, but I think it's really important to have those honest conversations, because otherwise people won't know. We can't expect them to know, especially if we're in a relationship with them.
Absolutely. And the knowledge is great for them as well. So that if that loud sound makes you afraid and now you're kind of maybe standoffish or don't want to be near this person, they may perceive it as a rejection of them, because to them, that's what it looks like. But if they can understand oh, that's a trigger for them, and maybe I can help them feel better, I can kind of avoid doing those things, then that also can build your relationship too, so you understand each other better.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Let's talk about early warning signs of coming out of your window of tolerance. What do you think that some of those early warning signs are? Because I know you talked about, so let's talk about hyper-arousal, high energy, anxiety, anger, feeling overwhelmed. Are there steps before we get to that part that we may recognize?
It depends on the situation. So if it's a trauma trigger and it's a really powerful trigger, you may have a big spike pretty quickly. However, if it's maybe an accumulation of the stress in your environment, then you're probably going to have things that you can notice. So when you think about hyperarousal, think about that as an increase of stress energy in your body. It really is, because your nervous system connects to a lot of your organs, and it'll start to release adrenaline, cortisol, the stress hormones. So for someone to start to notice that, they may start to feel more anxious, more tense or on edge, maybe a little bit jittery. a little bit more irritable, or like your fuse is shorter. You may start to get tension. So some folks will get like tension headaches or tension in their shoulders, maybe like a little bit of a stomach ache. So it can be very somatic. So those might be those early indicators. Hard time falling asleep, thoughts starting to move more quickly or starting to race. Those are associated with hyper-arousal because it's like an amp up that you're experiencing.
Okay. And what about hypo?
So hypo would be the opposite. So with hypo, you're coming down. So that could be a loss of energy. So you might start to be more sleepy or tired. You may start to feel more disconnected or not fully present, either like in your body or even in your surroundings, because an extreme of that's dissociation, which is like full on disconnecting. Less motivated could be a part of it. Just not wanting to do things, just think of it as like the energy is getting sucked away.
So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments and we'll try to get to them. It kind of goes by fast, but we'll do our best. Someone shared about hearing the voice of their abuser still, even though I believe that they're not around them anymore. So in a situation like that, would that consider a trigger? They may be hearing, or maybe even a song or a smell, a cologne they used to wear. I know some, if they went to get a massage, but their abuser used to be violent toward them or choke them. So there's just some things you can't do in those situations anymore when you're dealing with someone. So how would you suggest that someone who's has experienced trauma explain that to someone else? Like, these are some things that may trigger me, etc.
Yeah, I think that it's really great when you're able to use your voice. So you may be able to say to someone, and it depends how much you're comfortable sharing as well, but you could always say, like, there are certain things I tend to have a really strong reaction towards, and maybe you could like be kind of gentle with me through these things, or you could help me to like avoid these things. I know some things are unavoidable, like certain smells that might come out of nowhere, and smell is actually one of the most powerful triggers that we have, the olfactory sense. But there is also work you can do around triggers. So there are trauma-focused therapies, which have a lot of evidence behind them. So one is like EMDR, which I practice, and that can help reduce the intensity of memories. And then by doing that would reduce the intensity of triggers. There's also like the cognitive behavioral therapies, like prolonged exposure. And in prolonged exposure, you actually make a list of your triggers. You rate how intense they are, and your therapist will help you slowly address each one. So like, for example, I had a client once who was triggered in a certain aisle of the grocery store because certain things there had a lot of association. And so we may have had her start to practice things like, just walking by that aisle and like pausing for a moment, taking a couple of breaths. And then eventually she was able to start going down the aisle a little bit and taking some breaths. And we did a lot of work just to build up to it. So you can definitely work on your triggers, but I, recommend doing that with a trauma therapist so you can have support and pacing, which is important.
Yeah, very, very important to try to not do it by yourself and with someone who's trained to do it with you, because they're not always positive reactions. I mean, when you talk about that didn't happen over a few weeks. That took time to get that.
Absolutely.
Do triggers ever go away is a question that was asked.
Yes. So as you are able to work and process on those traumas, trauma therapy helps with the way a memory is actually stored in the brain. So traumatic memories are stored differently in the brain, and that's why the reminders bring on those really intense responses. So if you think about like something that happened to you that's positive, like let's say you think about like your graduation from grad school or something, you can look back on that and you can say like, oh, that was a great day. I liked what I wore. I looked good in the pictures or whatever it was, but you don't relive the experience of it. You don't feel the sensation of it in the same way. Trauma memories are stored differently. They're stored in a different part of the brain, which is why there's that reliving instead of remembering. When you engage in trauma therapy, it actually helps to change the way that memory is stored so that it's filed away more like a regular memory and not next to like all the emotion and sensation.
That's really good. I like how you broke that up, because honestly, trauma therapy, and I always say, I love counseling. It's important, but if you've experienced trauma, it is so good and important to get connected to a trauma therapist. Because I feel like I'm very visual, so I kind of break it down real simple. It's like you're taking the memories from this part and putting it in this part so that you're not reliving it every time it comes up, and time like, it's like I see a scar, like you cut yourself, I see the scar, it bled, but it healed. And so when I talk about what I experienced, even I shared a story of my daughter this past week, and people was, I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's okay. Like, I don't feel it anymore. It doesn't feel the same. It's there. I know it happened, but I don't cry when I share my story about abuse anymore because I processed it through trauma therapy. And it's not something that we should skip if we don't want to continue to relive these traumas in our life over and over again. It's very important. Someone talked about their child's temper tantrums caused by trauma triggers them. All right, so let me see if we can say. So their child's tantrum and anger caused by trauma, the clenching of the fist, the grinding of the teeth, triggers them because it sounds just like their abuser did. I know that's really tough. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about what they can do. But I did want to ask you a couple questions. So that window of tolerance, right? And I'm going to share it when we're done. Is anybody just kind of floating out there in that window of tolerance? Like, this is life?
No. So the window of tolerance is a great place to be, but it's definitely not where we stay all the time. So the goal is not that you're going to stay within your window of tolerance all the time, because life happens and you need to respond sometimes. Like if I'm driving in my car and someone comes to cut me off, I need that hyper-arousal, that extra stress energy so I can swerve out of the way, right? Or like another example could be if I really want to exercise and I have a great workout, after I might kind of collapse into like my body's just so tired and I'm just kind of like disconnected. And that's kind of like a hypo-arousal. So there's healthy ways to be in those states. It's that we want you to be able to have that kind of like activation and then your nervous system to kind of settle back down into your window until something else happens. And then maybe you'll have to kind of come down and you'll come up. So it's like a gentle cascade. What we don't want is what a lot of trauma survivors experience, which is these like sharp ups and downs because their nervous system's responding to just so many things around them. We want to only respond when something's truly dangerous and to be able to stay in our window when we're truly safe.
Yeah, that's good. Because even if we're not fit, sometimes as a trauma survivor, sometimes even if we are safe, we're shooting right up into fire really quickly just because, but it's not really necessary. It's not a necessary, but our body doesn't necessarily know that. So what would you say for someone who is kind of trying to figure out how to kind of stay in a healthy window of tolerance?
Yeah. So I would say to start practicing just recognizing, like checking in with yourself, maybe throughout the day, like, a couple times a day, where am I right now? So I may just take a couple moments and start to look at something like, how's my breathing? Is my breathing really like rapid and shallow? That might be a sign of hyperarousal. Is my breathing kind of like labored, or am I not really breathing properly? Am I feeling really low? Maybe I'm in hypo-arousal. How's my energy level? Do I feel really like jittery and amped up, or do I feel like I don't have enough energy to get through the day? Or it's my emotional state right now. How does my body feel? Does my body feel energized, or does my body feel fatigued? So really just starting to kind of check in and notice, not even needing to change anything, just starting to be more intentional about noticing what's going on, because oftentimes we try to disconnect from our body because we don't want to know what's going on, but it's helpful to know. So starting to just practice noticing, where am I? Where do I think I am? Do I think I'm up? Do I think I'm down? And then once we start to get that, kind of like extending a little bit of curiosity towards myself, like, okay, I'm kind of hyper-aroused. Like, so I'll give an example. Earlier today, I was kind of like jittery. I was kind of anxious. I was like, doing things around my house. And I kind of had to stop myself, like, kind of jittery. I'm kind of all over the place. Like, what's going on with me right now? Let me gently investigate this. I thought, well, I'm doing my first Facebook Live today. I'm probably a little bit nervous, right? Yeah. And so that allowed me to make that connection. Of course I'm nervous. I'm going to be on Facebook Live. People are going to be here. People might ask me questions. I'm going to be on the spot. So then I was able to offer myself that compassion of course you're nervous. It's your first time doing something. That's okay. And so then once I made that connection, how do I nurture myself through that? Is there a coping skill I like? Is there someone I can talk to? Was my dog around for a cuddle? Then I can help myself. And so I took a nice little shower with my lavender body wash and some nice like chill music, and I was ready to go.
I love that example. Actually, I really love it. I think because you took it from the beginning of your feelings all the way to getting to the other side of it. And realizing though, that you didn't stay in one way or the other, you checked with yourself. And to be honest with you, do we ever really slow down long enough to ask these questions of ourselves? And we really need to give ourselves that permission to have that grace. Ask ourselves, wait a minute, how am I doing? I notice myself feeling a little bit anxious. Like you said, why am I running around? What's really going on? And
Yes.
narrowing down what's really going on. Because as survivors of abuse, even for myself, we know how to stay busy. We were always in fight or flight mode, always trying not to walk on eggshells, always trying to do what was right, never really slowing down to check with ourselves because we're in survival mode. We didn't have time for that. And so I love how you talked about that. We have to slow down and check with our feelings, because there's a reason why we're getting all out of whack like that. And if we extend grace to ourselves, why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting this way? And then extend grace to ourselves. Because, Vanessa, I'm rambling, but we're always so quick to give grace to other people, but not to ourselves. Oh, you've been through so much. I understand why you feel that way. Shoot, put a mirror to your face. You've been through a lot too. And that's why you need to offer yourself some grace.
Absolutely. That self-compassion is so important. And it's really, really hard. And I know someone mentioned even like hearing someone else's voice. Like a lot of times we're really critical to ourselves in our thoughts, or we really are mean to ourselves. And sometimes I'll even ask people like, that voice in your head that's telling you like, get out of bed, or you're a failure, all these things, is that really you talking, or might that be someone else?
Great question.
And it sometimes is. If someone tells you something over and over, eventually you don't even need them to be there, right? You already know what they're going to say. So you just start saying it to yourself.
That's a great question. So we're going to ask it again for those of you that are listening. When you are so say if you're having a rough day, or you just really need to extend some grace to yourself, get out of the bed. You're so lazy. You're so this, you're so that. You're not a good enough parent or whatever. So who is that really talking? Is that you, or is that them? I know for myself, I heard my ex-husband's voice for the longest time after I was gone with him. I heard it so often, and oftentimes survivors say the same thing. But we have to be honest, is that them or is it me? Is this really how I feel about myself, or is this their critical voice coming in my head? And so I just want to encourage everyone who's listening, if you're experiencing anything similar to this, stop for a second and give yourself some grace. We're going to show you how to do that in just a little bit. But I kind of wanted somebody mentioned, hey, Chris. Okay, he mentioned earlier being disconnected, just choosing to, or maybe defaulting to disconnect. Where would you, as far as having experienced trauma?
Yeah, so disconnection is a survival response. And so a lot of times that is part of hypo-arousal, because there may have been something you experienced and you couldn't actually physically leave, because the person wouldn't let you leave, or because you were young and you had no control over what was going on. And so something that our body actually does to protect ourselves is to help us kind of disconnect from the present moment. So that could be like, if you ever just kind of zone out, that's like a part of like disconnecting, right? But during a traumatic experience, people will sometimes describe like actually feeling like they weren't really in their body. Like I wasn't really there. Like I was there, but I wasn't. Or even I've had folks tell me it was like I was watching it from like floating above myself. And that is really your body trying to protect you and survive a moment that is extremely stressful and extremely dangerous, and was probably the only choice you had in that moment. And so if it's worked before, your nervous system will do it again, because, they feel it's a survival strategy that works. But of course, once the trauma is over, it's no longer helpful to disconnect. We need to figure out ways to be more present.
I like how you said that. Your body thinks, well, if it worked before, I was able to protect them before, they were able to survive this traumatic moment, these traumatic experiences. We're going to just do it again because it seems to be the same thing. But being out of the abusive situation or whatever the trauma was, reacting in that same disassociation is not good.
Yeah. So like in the moment it worked and it kept you safe, but now that it's over, it's actually maybe hurting your life in some way. And so we can practice new and different responses. And as we practice them and we repeat them, your brain's creating new neural pathways. And now you're going to start to build in other ways for you to respond. But it's a practice, right? Again, in those traumatic times, maybe you needed that a lot. So be gentle with yourself as you create these other avenues for your body to respond, because it takes repetition, it takes practice, it takes work to start to really notice and be able to do things about it.
I love how you say that we can build the new neural pathways, a new way of life, a new way of thinking. Our brain can change, and it's the repetition of it all. So Raquel, how do you help someone who is experiencing derealization or depersonalization as a result of trauma? How do you help?
So often a good starting point is teaching grounding and orienting skills. So if you are like depersonalizing, if you feel like you're not fully in reality, what that really means is I don't feel like I am here in the present moment. And so what can I do to help bring myself back into the present moment? So what do I have in the present moment? I have my body and I have my senses. So often a popular one that lots of folks probably know is the grounding and orienting exercise, which is when you just look around and you name 5 things you can see. So I'll look around, I'll name 5 things I can see. I'll name 4 things I can touch, and I'll touch them, right? I'll actually feel that connection. What are 3 things I can hear? And then I'll maybe like name those out. 2 things I can smell, and I'll take a breath. What can I smell? And then last can be 1 thing I can taste. So you can take yourself through that and help remind yourself and bring yourself into the present moment. So that's a popular one.
Okay, we're going to go back over that real quick. So bringing ourselves back down to reality, recognizing that come on, help me out here. You know, we're not
dissociated.
We're not present in the moment. We're just so 5 things we can.
5 things we can see.
5 things we can see. So you look around and see different 5 things. Name the things that you can see.
And say them out loud.
Say them out loud. So 5 things that you can say out loud that you can see, right?
Mm-hmm.
4 things that you can touch.
Yeah, and then touch them. So like I might touch my desk, I can touch my plant, I can touch my shirt, I can touch my pen, right? Whatever's around. And again, bringing in that tactile sensation, that's going to help bring me back into my body because those are my senses. So 4 things you can touch. And then I think we did 3 things we can hear. I mean, you could do them in any order, but 3 things you could hear. And then you might have to kind of slow down, right? I can hear like birds chirping outside. I can hear Lisa's voice. I can hear like this little thing moving around. So then after that, you do the 2 things that you can smell. So I'll have to take a deep breath. So you can smell, I think it's like Febreze and my laundry or something in the other room. And then 1 thing you can taste.
Okay. I like that because it really brings you down for a second. And what is the whole purpose of that? Like when you do that, you're coming back into the present moment.
Yeah, so you're reorienting to the present moment. And another important aspect of that is you're reorienting to the safety of the present moment. Because when you're reliving something, it's taking you typically to a place of feeling like you're in danger. Right. And so this is another way of reminding myself, I'm actually here right now and I'm safe right now. So it's reorienting. It's a form of grounding. Yep. It's a great tool.
It is a great tool. We did it in one of our programs, and we talked about how you just feel yourself in the seat, feel your feet on the floor, just different ways that you can do it to say, I'm present in this moment and I'm safe. And so when you find yourself feeling chaotic and afraid, and the truth of the matter is you really are, just take a moment and ground yourself. And I think it's also important to have people that are close to you and connected to you, like we talked about earlier, that can say, hey, I kind of see you, kind of going somewhere. So how about you just ground yourself just for a second? Let's do it together. That we can do together. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things, some of the tools that they can use to kind of bring themselves back together. Share with us. Here we go.
Yeah. So there's lots of different tools, right? Like if there are different coping skills that you like to use, all of those can be valuable. Any different like sensory thing that you like. I know lots of folks like essential oils, so having those types of things handy. Sensory things like clay or putty or stress balls, all of those things can be really great. But the ones I'm going to teach to you are a little bit more like somatic and body oriented. So probably the most like simple anchor to the present moment and to kind of change the way you're feeling is really your breath. So when we're stressed, our breathing tends to change. Like it might get really like hyperventilated, really short and gasping for air. And then that's going to make our body feel even more stressed out. So if we need to relax, there's a certain way to engage your body's relaxation response with your breath. Also, if you need to energize your body, there's also things that you can do with your breath. So if you'd like, I'll guide you through just a little breathing exercise. So we'll do first the relaxing breath. Okay. All right. So if it feels comfortable, I invite you to bring 1 hand to the chest here. And then you can bring another hand to the belly here, like over the belly button or something. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or you can find a soft spot to look down or to soften your gaze. Just starting to connect to the rhythm of the breath. Just starting to notice your body's own pattern of breathing. Not trying to change anything yet, but maybe just noticing that gentle rise of the inhale, that nice soft exhale. So in a moment, we're going to begin a relaxing breath. I'll guide you through it. And what we'll be doing is we'll be breathing in through the nose for about 3 seconds. We'll be holding it at the top, and then we'll be letting it out of the mouth, nice and slow and longer, so at least like 5 seconds. So when you're ready, we'll inhale through the nose, hold it at the top, and let it out nice and slow. Inhale through the nose, hold, and exhale nice and slow. Let's do one more, in through the nose, hold, and let it out nice and slow. Okay. So if you have to, you can kind of shake it out.
I'm so like not a good relaxing person. I'm the worst. It was so hard. You guys doing this with us? I hope you're gaining some of these tools. And all of our students from Jamaica, make sure you grab some of these tools so that you can use them with your clients. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So the great thing about that is it's super simple. When you hold on to your chest and your abdomen in that way, you're actually connecting to the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is one of the things that sends those messages about danger and safety through your nervous system. So this is a way of kind of providing that comfort to your nervous system. And our body's relaxation response happens on the exhale. So when you're doing a breathing exercise and you're trying to come down or trying to relax, you want a nice long exhale, which is why we count it out and we let it be nice, long, and slow. So if you want to come down, that's a tool to practice. But let's say like you're tired, you need to energize, maybe you're about to like go into something. You can also energize your body with your breathing, and that would kind of be the opposite. So with an energizing breath, what you're going to do is really focus more on like quicker, short breaths. So if you'd like, we can practice this one as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to inhale through the nose, and then we're going to do 3 short, quick exhales out of the nose, and you can clap as you do it if you'd like, just to bring in like a little bit more of like that tactile sense. Let's do that one. Let's do it twice. Let's just see if you notice a difference, and you can watch me do it.
Christine, could you please send us an inbox? Okay, sorry, I'm ready.
Okay, so we're going to breathe in through the nose, and then out 3 times really quick. Out through the nose. Okay, let's try it again. Let's breathe in through the nose. Out 3 times quick. In again. Out 3 times. So you might notice a difference with these. That is more of an energizing breath. You're doing like those short, quick out breaths. And that helps to kind of like liven up the system a little bit. Okay. So if I needed to bring some energy into the body, I may do something like that.
Okay, got it.
Another thing you could do if you need to kind of get back into the body is just a simple like patting down of the body. And you could do like all around. I might do this. I could do like behind my neck. I could stand up and I could do my legs.
Why am I doing that?
So if you're feeling that hypo-arousal, that disconnection, this is a way of using your sensory system to reconnect to the body and remind myself I'm here in my body. Okay. So that's another thing. A lot of like gentle movement could be good for hypo-arousal as well. So sometimes I'll put on like, if you ever listen to like India Ari, I Am Light. It's a really beautiful, like soothing, nice song. And so imagine you're feeling really shut down. So I'm trying to kind of bring energy slowly back up. I'm trying to come back into the window. So I may put that song on and I may say, okay, let's just like listen to this, and we can kind of like sway, we can start to move, and we can start to feel that connection again. And so that could also bring some energy in. Music can be a really great tool for either one. I always encourage people.
Music is so healing. You know, even when you're upset and you're angry, you have that song. But when you want to heal or lift yourself up, India Ari is one of my favorites. And she had this one album when I was going through, and I literally would turn it on and dance through the house because it was just such a freeing thing. And so music has really powerful ways to help. So I love it.
Yes. I always tell people make like a playlist, like I need to energize myself playlist, and then I need to like settle myself down playlist, and have those as part of your tools too.
Yeah, really, really important. I love that.
Yes.
All right. So you're going to talk the butterfly one?
Oh yeah. So let's do the butterfly hug. So this is one of my absolute favorites, and this is a really great grounding tool. For me, this one works either way, if I need to like kind of come down or if I need to come up. But again, everyone's body is different. So I encourage you to just practice these and see how they feel for you. So the butterfly hug is a somatic tool. So there's kind of two ways to do it. So you can do the butterfly hug. This is one option. You can link your thumbs like this, like make that little butterfly. And where you want to put that is here, so that your fingertips are resting underneath your collarbone. You actually have like 2 acupressure points here. And so having even like just noticing this spot can sometimes feel relaxing. So this is one option for the butterfly hug. The other you can do is you could do on the biceps. So you could have your arms crossed and you could have your hands here. So you can just kind of notice those two and see which one you like better. I tend to like this one. So all we're going to do for this one is we're going to take a couple deep breaths, and we're going to do slow alternating taps on either arm. And this is going to help us feel more grounded and regulated. So when you're ready, we can just take a nice breath in through the nose. Let it out nice and slow. And just start to do slow alternating taps here. Just allowing any sense of calm or relaxation to come forward. Don't forget to breathe.
Yeah, I think I was breathing.
Nice breath in through the nose. And out nice and slow.
Yourself a good hug. I love it. I love how we're just tapping into the physical body, realizing how connected it is with our nervous system. Someone asked, I have difficulty with sensory triggers. How do you ground yourself when you have a sensory trigger?
Ooh, I have difficulty. I'm wondering what kind of sensory triggers that it would be.
So if you'd like to answer that question in the comments, we will look out for your question. I wanted to ask you a question. So what happens to our bodies when we're in that hyper-arousal state? Because I'm sure that it can't be good. We're barely breathing. We're up all over the place. What happens to us at that point?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty big response with our body. So like I said, your body releases a lot of stress hormones, and your body's really preparing to keep you safe in an intense moment that it perceives as dangerous. So a lot of your things that you might notice are associated with like your heartbeat going up. You may feel like your heart is pounding, your palms get sweaty. Your body actually starts to send your blood towards your limbs, because if you're going to run or fight off an attacker, that's where it wants all the energy to go. So over time, folks may start to have difficulty with things like digestion, because digestion slows down during that. They may start to have like high blood pressure associated with it, maybe more like chronic issues of health. Like a lot of folks I work with have issues with like chronic pain or fibromyalgia. And that's because it really does involve multiple body systems. You know, it's not just an emotional process. It really changes the way our body's responding to the moment. Feel really like hot and distressed.
Yeah, so it can have long-term impacts on our body.
Yeah.
When we're not in that state anymore. And I know this may be a challenging question. So what happens if you're not gone from your abuser per se, right? Or you've left them, but you still are kind of in fear of them, fear of retaliation, going through child support, going through custody, all this kind of, so you're kind of still living in that same sense, like you may be physically safe, but you're not quite sure if you're physically safe. So we're not even in the window pretty much.
Yeah. So, for lots of folks, that is a problem because there are just like chronic stressors that come up. And so we know that it is going to be really triggering. Like if, you have to see this person when you drop off your kids, if you haven't gotten like custody figured out, or maybe they like blow up your phone and things. And so to really practice those grounding and orienting techniques in those moments when you truly are safe to help give your nervous system a break. So what around me allows me to know in this moment I am safe, right? Maybe it's that I was able to put all the locks on my door. I turned the cameras on. I know that if anyone was to come up to my doorstep, I have an alarm. Maybe I have a friend with me or someone who stays there and I know they're going to keep me safe. Can I really take in those things that keep me safe as much as I give attention to the things that make me afraid and like I'm in danger? Because we don't want to just exclude the amount of safety that we do have. We want to consider that as well so we can enjoy it and really take it in when we are safe.
I really like that. That was really good, Vanessa. I love that answer. I loved it because I think oftentimes the survivors, especially transitioning out, you're kind of just in constant fear, but not realizing, wait a minute, I left. I've got my cameras up, the police are on rotation or whatever. I'm living in a different country. I live in a different state. They're in jail. And I work with survivors whose abuser is locked up and they still live as though they're sleeping next to them. Their bodies haven't regulated or realized that they're no longer in that physical danger anymore. So I love that. Telling yourself the truth of the situation. I'm safe. They're in jail. They're deceased. I don't have to be afraid. I have cameras. I'm not alone. All those kind of things I think are really good. I really like when you said that. So she did answer our questions and she said smells and sounds. And someone else said touch and audio. So to regulate yourself when you're having those issues. Let me go back. I have difficulty with sensory triggers. So smells, sounds, touch, audio. How do I ground myself in those situations?
Yeah. So there's a great practice. It's by Tara Bach, I believe, or Tara Brock. She's a meditation teacher and a psychologist. And it's a practice of radical self-compassion. And it goes along with really everything that we've been talking about so far. It's called RAIN. So if you're experiencing a trigger, I would suggest something like RAIN. And RAIN is recognize what's happening, right? Can I tell myself in this moment I'm being triggered because I just smelled this smell or I just heard this thing? Can I accept where that comes from, right? It's making me feel like I'm in danger and I know where that's coming from. So the A is for acceptance, the I is for investigate. Maybe you have to kind of investigate where it's coming from. And then the N is nurture. So how do I nurture myself through that? If it's a particular smell, maybe I can keep something with me, like an essential oil, and I can have a smell that I've already associated with, calm or peace, and I can smell like that lavender or something else in that moment. If it's a sound, maybe I can call someone who I really trust and I can hear the sound of their voice and help myself get back into my window of tolerance in that way. Or even maybe there's like a song. So how can I kind of nurture myself and offer myself something that is comforting or that does feel safe to help myself respond to that trigger and kind of take some of the power of it away?
I love that. It's in a way I heard you talking like a reprogramming. Like before this smell used to associate that, but now when I smell that, I grab my little, lavender oil and I smell that. Instead of this smell, now instead, I call this person or I put this on. It's a reprogramming. And you said something earlier, I don't know if it was before we came or not, but realizing that all of our bodies are different. Not one thing is necessarily going to work for everyone across the board. You really have to figure out what works for you and then do that thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It can be a lot of fun too. Like, just trying things out. What are the smells I like? What are the sounds I like? What are maybe even positive memories or really good times I've experienced? And I can have like a picture of that on my phone. So when I feel afraid, I can look at that time I was at the beach and I felt that sense of peace or that calm, and I can look at that. Even like looking at beautiful images is shown to help you get back into your window of tolerance. So it doesn't have to be, I go and I do this like 1 hour thing where I, take a 20-step journey into regulating myself. But what are those like easy to access tools that I can start to integrate that just help me in the moment?
I love that. Beautiful images, reprogramming, finding some tools is something that, because obviously you can't control when the triggers come, but I think working toward controlling what happens when the triggers do occur, being prepared, like some of the grounding things we talked about today, some of the tools that you can use so that when that trigger does appear, you're able to, I was going to say, lack of a better term, switch it to something else, but slowly begin to utilize something in its place so that it no longer causes that sense of fear for you. or, you know, fight or flight inside of you.
Absolutely. And always with a lot of just love and self-compassion towards yourself and your experience.
I love that. I love it. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and share later on that window of information so you guys can kind of see, so you can kind of get more of a visual of what we talked about. But I want to put her information. LongBeachTraumaTherapy.com is where you can find Vanessa, who is amazing. And specifically, if you live in California, she is able to work with you if you live in California. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And you can also follow me on Instagram. I'm at _trauma therapist, and I post a lot of tips and other information on there as well. So you can always look at that. There's some videos. You can see the butterfly hug again if you want to practice it. So you can catch me there too.
_therapist. Trauma therapist. Did I get that right?
_trauma therapist. Yeah.
There it is. That's on Instagram, you guys. And so I definitely encourage you to connect with her. Be honest with yourself. Understand where you are in the journey, and understand your body is just doing its best to protect you. But I want to challenge you from survivor to survivor to start to put different tools, some of what we shared tonight, into your toolbox so that you can use them. And so the triggers don't start to consume your life, but that you start to take control. Come on now, we're giving you back the control here so that you can kind of start to create your own narrative. And Vanessa, I love what you talked about when you said, start to reprogram yourself to what made me happy, or what do I like to do? You know, so this is like not the best example, but I know when I was married to my ex-husband, birthdays, he made a wreck. They were terrible. I would be crying. It was always about him. I did something wrong. So I was going to do this for you, but now because you did that, you get nothing, right? And so I decided after I left, every birthday that I have, it's going to be amazing. And I literally have done that for the past 10 years. I had to, because what happened initially was it was so depressing and sad. Every year I knew December 3rd was going to come and he was going to make hell break loose. So from now on, when my birthday come, I made it amazing. I've been on cruises. I decided to change that for myself. And so I want to challenge you guys to do the same thing. If there's a memory, if there's a trigger that you can work through, take your control back, take your power back, like Vanessa said, and don't allow them to control any more of your life.
Absolutely. You get to write your new story.
You get to write your new story. And I promise you're going to love it better if you take that pen and you start to write. Don't let anybody write it for you. Those days are definitely over if you let them. Once you're out of the relationship, don't allow that trauma to continue to consume you. If you can connect with the trauma therapist, if you can start to refile that trauma so that it doesn't physically affect you. I'm going to remember that one forever. That was definitely one. So anyway, if you guys don't have any other questions, we are going to free Vanessa because I'm so thankful that you joined me tonight. Thank you so much. Remember, you can find her on Instagram she has great tools on Instagram under _trauma therapist, and you can find her on her website at LongBeachTraumaTherapy.com. All right, you guys, I will see you next time. See ya.
Thank you.